Well, welcome to episode 8.
Woo!
That might have surprised
Bringing a bit of high energy. Oh, come on!
Oh, gosh.
Is anyone there listening still?
Yeah, hopefully.
Probably not.
Hopefully.
No, hopefully, yes.
Yes, they are. We're trusting that you are. This is the final episode
Woo!
in the series. You sound like a slightly odd dog somehow.
Ooh, harsh.
Yapping into the microphone. Yes, final episode 8 of the series. It has been a pleasure,
What's the
hasn't it?
podcast called?
At Home with the Hugheses. And where are we?
At home.
We're finally at home,
Yes.
which is very nice.
So we've been journeying through different topics. This is episode 8. It's going to be the end of, is it season 1?
Season 1, series 1.
Series
We're
1,
British.
whatever,
Let's
yeah.
go with series 1.
And then depending if anyone's listened or interested or whatever,
Sorry, I just inhaled my drink. Sorry.
We might moving forward sort of hone in on different themes,
Yeah.
relationships or communication or what were some of the
Let's
other things
let's not promise to it. We don't know what we're going to do
Yeah.
for series 2.
But
we'll come up
maybe
with
going a
plan.
bit more, rather, we've gone a bit more high level oversight, but go,
A deeper dive.
oh yes, drill deep into
Stop,
different
it's that
topics.
northern accent. I fear you're going to alienate anyone that sort of...
I love the North. I've been to university in Sheffield. We live in the Midlands, so we're neither south nor north. So it's just, yeah.
Anyway, what are we looking at today?
What we're going to do today is, I mean, this might be a little bit more niche, but hopefully there are lessons to be learned or insights. One of the things we've really tried to do is work well together.
Together.
So we lead together.
Together.
I mean, I'm here and you're.
If you're listening, you won't have seen Tim's rather patronising gesture, actually.
No, we very much lead together, but that has been intentional. That has been challenging, but that has been, I'd say, an absolute joy and a gift.
Oh, I'm glad you feel like that.
But it's been a massive journey there. So we thought we'd quickly spend some time unpacking something of our story, how we've gone about it, what we've learned, what's been difficult, what maybe the vision for the future is.
And we thought we'd do this sort of more or less chronologically, didn't we? Rather than sort of thematically, because then we're just going to be sharing our story. Because I think, in a sense, if you are called to lead together, whether that's as a married couple or in sort of team leadership, then it's so unique.
Yes.
By nature, it's going to be sort of a combination of your different personality types and strengths and context. So we felt like thematic might be unhelpful and actually rather just sharing our story might be the better way to do it. So that's what we're going to do. So, I mean, I am notorious for...
Very long stories.
Oh, gosh, I didn't even finish my sentence.
So why don't we start... So we got married September the 4th, 2004.
We met, though,
That's
in
back
1978 when I was
you were
born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a backstory.
Because we grew up together. That's a good story, though.
It is a good story, but not for this podcast. And so we got married. You had been working, well, you say at the BBC.
Yeah, so I did a degree, not a particularly good degree, but I did do a degree in film, television and theatre. Tim's smirking. And
No, not at the degree. There was a joke going through my head.
Oh.
Well, that if you could have got graded for partying and drinking, you'd have
got a first. Yeah. Sadly, I didn't get a first in my academic studies.
If I could have been graded for like attendance at Christian Union.
You'd have done very, very well. We had a very different university experience, to be fair to say. Very different. Anyway, I knew that I really wanted to work in the TV industry. I actually wanted to be an actress. Did you know that? You must have known that, yes.
Gosh, the drama over 20 years of marriage.
So I wanted to be an actress and I wanted to go to drama school, but my parents said, why don't you do university first? And if you still want to be an actress, do that. And actually that was quite wise because I left uni and I thought, I don't want to be an actress. No. I'd like to go into TV. And actually I wanted to be a TV presenter. That's what I would go so far as to say that I felt caught. Why are you laughing?
No, just because we're sort of talking about leadership together. Hearing your
my biography.
Passion to be a Blue Peter presenter. But no, carry on, sorry.
Well, okay.
No, you want to be a presenter.
Slightly taking the wind out of my sails.
No, because
there.
actually, coming back to it, it always played a part of what you do now.
I think so. I think, and I felt called to it. I think that was the point, is that yes, I'd had these fairly wild years and then I had come back to Jesus and I was working at the BBC. And And it actually been really hard work to get a job at the BBC. I'd worked in a whole bunch of other production companies in Manchester for a short time and then in London. And it's really hard to break into the TV industry. And so I'd done it. I'd got in there and I really felt God had put me there. And
because I actually remember you were working at the BBC, and the moment I thought I'm going to marry you is I landed off the plane. I'd been in Australia. You picked me up. You took me straight to the BBC studios to watch Britney Spears sing "Toxic."
Yeah,
for Top of the Pops.
A metre from your face, which is not what you want to take your boyfriend to, quite honestly.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to marry Rach. That was a big moment for us.
Yeah. Well, I had friends who worked on Top of the Pops, so always got free tickets. Anyway, so there were perks. And I loved it. It was an amazing place to be and an amazing industry, very full of lots of obviously really creative people. It was buzzy. And I did feel really cool to be there. And then I met you.
So, but I'd also say instrumental in your kind of the makeup of who you are is, I think what I've seen and loved is your parents, Frank and Larry.
Fraser and
Lazar. I think they were amazing at no glass ceilings over you. They, really, they're so proud of you, believe in you. And so I think you grew up under that environment, which was go for it.
And also, sorry, I was going to say, I'm also one of 4 siblings and we're all really different. And that was the other thing I think my parents did really well, is that my older 2 brothers are both doctors, medical doctors. And I was terrible at sciences at school and maths. Actually, I wasn't too bad at maths. But like medicine was never going to be the plan for me. And that's great. My brothers both have sort of done very well in their careers. But what I loved is that my parents really honoured the things that I was good at. Yeah. And so they really encouraged me to pursue performing arts, was something that I was passionate about, English literature, those sorts of things. And so there was never sort of a sense of my brothers were better because they were doing medicine and I was doing performing arts.
So you grew up in that family environment. You're then working at the BBC and doing well, sort of getting promotions.
I mean, I was doing okay. I would...
Yeah, don't do yourself down. I mean, you could get free tickets to Britney Spears and Top of the Pops.
I'd made it. I mean, that
amazing.
Is the pinnacle of my...
No, but you were doing well,
TV
connecting
career.
well,
but I was
learning how to work hard, connect well, deliver.
And work for, actually, I had a couple of lovely bosses. I also had some really awful bosses. And working in an environment, to be honest, we were talking about culture last episode. I mean, some of the culture was utterly toxic.
But I guess my point being, so there's this, you are an unbelievably natural leader. So I'd look at your family, you bring a lot of, in terms of making things happen, getting things done.
I'm quite bossy in that context.
Yeah, some might say bossy. But there's watching you in our family. So there's leadership all over you. You're seeing that in the BBC. Well, just say briefly though, for you, and I think you have talked about this a bit, but sometimes then in the church context where perhaps it wasn't as naturally encouraged. In some churches we know perhaps they don't have a theology for women for senior female leadership.
Which we should talk about, actually.
Yeah. And then and for others it's maybe that we've definitely looked at this, the thing of like attracts like. So you have a male leader, they're going to more naturally connect and pastor and identify
and
younger male leader, and then you perpetuate male leaders, probably the people they listen to will be other male communicators, so that's what they think is. Do you mean it just perpetuates this thing of maleness in leadership in the church? Anyway, how did you sometimes find that?
Do you know, interestingly, I would say the first time that I ever thought of myself as a leader was when I put on a production of Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at our church. Yeah. We had just started dating and I was still working at the BBC. And why you keep laughing, recalling
I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Do you remember that really awkward conversation? We'll tell the story and then
that was a bit of a moment for us in our relationship. But anyway, so I love musicals and I love I love the sort of the role of director, producer, that sort of thing. And I guess I would never have described it as leadership at the time, but now I look back and I think
massive.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
And so I pulled together a cast of about 50 people, a crew of about...
Volunteers.
Yeah, all volunteers, a crew of about 50 people. And for, I don't know how many months it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, we put on this production.
Yeah.
Of Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's quite a long time. Let's just go with Joseph. It's quicker. Yeah. And to be fair, the pastor of the church was fully supportive of it and really encouraged it and gave us like full rein just to go for it. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. Yeah. I still look back now. I was probably 24 at the time. And I just so loved... Again, goes back to that culture thing, the leadership thing, taking people. Point A was like nothing. Point B was this full-on, all singing, all dancing, literally, production of Joseph. And I think what I recognised is I loved, obviously, a project. Yeah. I loved sort of embracing a project.
Vision to action.
That's to action.
That's basically what we did.
Yeah. But the other side is I loved including people. Yes. I loved how many people in the church it drew in. People that were before maybe sitting on the periphery. Different gift sets. You know, stuff that I knew I didn't have and other people sort of stepping up. And there were also people outside the church that got involved. It became a bit of an evangelistic thing. And I remember, the other thing is every rehearsal we would pray. Yeah. That before we started any rehearsal, we would really pray that God would use it. And we saw God use it in an amazing ways. People invited their friends to come and watch it. And it felt like such a moment within the church at that time. And now I look back and think, I led that. Yeah. And I wouldn't have used that language before. And so I think that probably was a bit of a moment. And at the same time, I mean, I look back, I don't quite know how I did it because I was also doing a full-time job at the BBC. But I think did a bit of juggling.
Well, and your incredible capacity to get a lot of things done, a whole lot of things. The reason I was laughing is I was actually in America. Yeah. We were early dating, so obviously I hadn't...
Yeah, we just started dating, hadn't we?
And I can't remember.
You travelled so much in those early years.
But I hadn't quite celebrated enough.
Basically, it was the production, and this was huge. I'd been working on this for months.
I missed it all, which I'm generally
You weren't even there for it, but that you couldn't have held that. That wasn't the issue. But you didn't call me. That's what it was. Yeah. After the first performance, the first night, you didn't even... it's all coming back to me now.
I thought there was something funny about it, but
no. You did.
It doesn't reflect well on me,
You didn't call me.
Yeah, I didn't know that was...
and I sent you an email.
I called you after.
No, you didn't. And I sent you a very
really
strong worded email. I don't think it was even passive. I think it was just... And the thing was, I think it's fair to say that the dynamics in our relationship early on is that you were this... this big deal worship leader.
I've walked into an absolute landmine here. I've in my head, I remember a slightly funny conversation.
But I think this is actually an important part of us navigating, leading together. I'm about to actually say some nice things about you. Because the truth is the dynamics within our relationship, putting it like really humanly speaking, in the Christian world, you were this like big deal worship leader. You'd written these songs that were sung all over the world. You were well known, people, and to be fair, girls were throwing themselves at you at this point.
No, but
they were. Maybe
they were
not literally.
Throwing themselves at
not
me.
literally.
I think I'd have remembered that.
But you were not without offers at the time. Anyway, okay. I was aware that there were a lot of girls that would have liked to be married to Tim Hughes, the amazing worship leader Tim Hughes.
Right.
So I don't know why I did an American accent. Sorry if you're American listening. Anyway, and I was conscious of the dynamics in our relationship. And my mum would always say to me, remember, Rachel, you're the catch. Yeah. You're the catch. And I think there was a temptation to sort of feel like I'm the lucky one. Oh, aren't I lucky? I get to date like the Tim Hughes. Yeah. And I didn't want to come under that.
You didn't. You didn't in any way. I don't think I've ever... No. So...
But all that to say, it was those sorts of things that were quite hard, that relative to you leading worship in front of, 20,000 people, I was putting on this little production of Joseph at the church. And I think the temptation would be
Yeah.
for that to seem unimportant.
Yeah. And that's...
And so then when you don't
Yeah. No.
call, it plays into this narrative.
I think I did apologise back
think
then.
you did.
And then 6 months after that, and then 3 years after that. But,
No.
But again, once more, I am very sorry.
No.
No, but this is part of the learning, isn't
Yeah.
it? That actually that was a learning point and a
Yeah.
moment for me. And I think it probably did reveal, if I can self-reflect, because I would never describe myself as a selfish
An
person.
egotistical.
No, but although you have called me that a few times, but
No.
you've called me selfish.
Have I?
Oh yeah,
Oh, you've called me all sorts.
beautiful,
Oh.
kind, loving, genius. But I think, and this is the hard thing with ministry, you get caught up in your ministry.
Yeah.
And ego is so caught up when there's platform and music and all of these things. I mean, if you say it's not in there, I think you're
kidding yourself.
lacking any self-awareness. And I think it had become a bit, I was caught up in my own world, and it was moving fast and doors were opening, it was exciting. And actually to remember suddenly, hang on a sec, who says what's more valuable, more successful, more beautiful, more important than the other?
Yeah.
And actually, if we were going to get married, then a marriage is mutually submitting to one another and creating space to honor and release each other's in their call and their gifts. And so for me, actually, that Joseph production was as important as anything I'm doing, because we're married now. Well, we were going to get married. So that's where you then have to learn to, I guess, that transformation of marriage from one individual thing to this team thing, mutually submitting, is a journey.
And I think it also probably spoke early on into the dynamics within our marriage, that there are different models. Everyone's unique. Every marriage is unique. But recognizing that there are some relationships where there's a very distinct leadership calling on one person.
Yeah.
And let's name it, often it's been the man. That there's been a very historically, a very distinct leadership call. And often they might be married to somebody whose calling is to support them. And so you have the sort of the leader, the one who's got a very distinct call, and then the support person, which is where the whole sort of vicar's wife concept comes from.
Yeah.
And I think we both knew very early on that wasn't going to be the model for us.
Yeah.
And it's not like I had sort of, like deceived you into thinking that.
Gosh, I knew, yeah. But then that's what I love about you, and that's, of course, one of the massive things that has attracted me to you is your strength of conviction, your passion, your leadership. I think you were very good reflecting back at being really honest about how certain things made you feel around, but I think it's really important around what you were passionate about, what you saw in your life, where things felt imbalanced. Because I think that some married couples, they feel things, but they never really articulate. And maybe one of the partners is expecting the other person to see it. For example, the danger could be you sort of waiting for me to
see it,
to see the gift, to sort of create space, to dial back my opportunities to propel you forward. And
that's not really fair on you, because
yes, but sometimes you need to say, hey, I can see this call and worship leading in your life, but I'm not, and you said this, I am not going to be your backing singer. And to be honest, you probably wouldn't have passed the audition anyway. But that we knew very quickly. We did a tour in America together. We knew that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to cut the mustard. So,
but I think it's important, again, this is where I've got to be careful here, because every relationship's different. The danger is, and I again don't want to sort of preempt what people might be thinking. The danger is I can then be categorized as the pushy wife.
Yeah.
That is sort of so demanding and feisty, that all these bossy, feisty, pushy.
Yeah.
Which really infuriates me.
really unfair that those kinds of thoughts are dumped on women.
Yeah.
That strong, driven, powerful women. I mean, you used the word, thankfully I didn't, like bossy.
Yeah.
You'd never hear a man being called bossy.
No.
Probably more like a bully would be the words you use for a man. But there are these kind of ideas, these kind of lazy preconceptions, kind of characteristics that are dumped on strong female leadership. And I think actually, all that to say, I've really valued you being clear and honest about the sense of what you feel God's called you to in your life. And that at times, I think for us, again, sometimes your strong justice sense around, and now we see massively with the Orchard call to empower and vision women. I think sometimes there was mixed in with the justice bit, if I'm honest, some hurt and pain.
Definitely.
And maybe some stuff that was coming out felt a bit...
Well, it was loaded and probably unfair at times.
Yeah, and the danger of moving into this, which I see why, but I think it's hard where almost the way to rectify what's been wrong is to pull down or to, in an unhealthy way, fight to recorrect a balance. And I think actually what you've learned through lots of prayer, through lots of tears, through lots of hurt, through lots of study, through lots of thinking is actually a really redeemed and glorious way to elevate women. But can I just finish? What you also do amazingly is I think you've really challenged men where their preconceptions or their lazy patterns of thinking need to be challenged, but you've done it in a really constructive, healthy way.
Well, because I think the win is men and women leading in equality and equity.
Yeah.
And it's never the goal that women should take the place of men. In fact, I was speaking at this conference overseas, and this quite well-known male Christian leader came up to me at the end and was really encouraging. Yeah. And he said to me, you know what, us men, we just need to take a back seat now. We just need you women to take over. Yeah. We just need to let you, we've had a go at it for centuries and we've really messed it up. Yeah. So my view is we need to step right back and let you women just crack on, take the lead, because...
Which of course is silly thinking.
Well, exactly, that's my point. Yeah, don't worry. But my point, and he was being slightly facetious. Well, I don't know. There was quite a seriousness what he's saying, but I was saying back to him, brilliant, ha ha ha. And he's like, no, I'm serious. It's like, but actually that's not the answer.
No, it's both
and that's what I'm saying is we need men and women leading together. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean every couple of course is called to lead in the way that we are, and that's the point. But in any context, I think we need a healthy balance of male and female voices in order to create healthy organizations.
So to jump back into
our story.
Yeah, I'll do the next bit, just speed it up a bit. So we got married, and I think we were pregnant. And at that point...
I was pregnant. Well, you weren't pregnant. I was pregnant.
I did have a little part to play in it. But I was considering ordination. But actually, no, sorry, I said we both were considering ordination. Yeah. And we actually both went to see... In the Church of England, you have a thing called the DDO, which basically is the first conversation about whether there's
a call
and whether that vocation needs to be further explored for priesthood. Yeah. We both went because I think both of us could equally feel that call to the Church of England, to leadership.
I feel like you've jumped on a bit. I think there's a bit before that. But anyway, you carry on.
What?
Well, I think we were on a journey of discerning a calling to lead in a church context, because I feel like that was a big jump for me, that I never ever thought that I would work for a church ever. And then it was only through us getting together, being married to you, and I started to do some ministry trips with you.
Yes.
And I started to do a little bit more in church. Yeah. I remember,
teaching,
being asked
hosting,
to speak, host gatherings. And it was only then that I started to think, oh, maybe actually this is what I'm called to. Yeah. And then, so almost discerning my own call alongside yours. And then I vividly remember in London, us sitting around the kitchen table, having some really robust conversations about whether we were called to lead together, and if one day we were going to plant a church, what would that look like? And I feel like that, though we had, I'd say, years of conversations like that. Like, well,
That's
look,
quite big blazing rounds.
yeah,
Didn't we?
like, well, if we're going to do this together, like, it's going to really have to be together. We're going to have to allow each other space.
We'd argue a lot because you wanted me to commit to
50% of the childcare. That
No,
isn't unrealistic.
No, I know.
So don't scoff.
I'm not scoffing, but I remember like we would both get. That was really
And
hard.
this was before we had kids. That's
know.
what's interesting. Is
And
before
I think,
we had kids.
yeah, and then obviously you were like,
I really want to raise my babies.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, and I'd love. Yeah. Anyway.
but the point being, we really had to wrestle through.
I think
all of
probably
these
I
things.
just wanted you to agree to that in principle, and I was trying to make the point that if we were both equally called to leadership, then that had to be reflected in the practical outworkings of our lives. And I would say that is the most fundamental part of couple leadership. Is that it is worked
equal
out.
couple leadership.
Equal couple leadership. That it is worked out in the day-to-day practicals. Who's picking the kids up from school?
Yeah.
Who's dropping them home? Who's going to put them to bed on a Sunday evening?
And we should come back to that. So,
and obviously not all couples have children, just to be clear.
yeah, had that conversation. We went to this Pleasant Church of England, and you were like, hang on a sec, I'm pregnant, 3 years of theological education, it's just not going to work.
No.
So we agreed that I would.
Again, personal decision. I know other women, brilliant female leaders who have done that.
And I trained with a bunch
fine.
of women who are having babies at the same time of training, and unbelievable the way they sort of held all those things together whilst being brilliant mums. So that was our decision. I then began my curacy at HTB, and I'd say for those years, predominantly HTB, while having children, you were the primary carer.
Very much, yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. And amazing at it, and found a lot of life, joy in it, as well as some challenges. But when we began to feel this call to lead a church, and since Birmingham, that's when I guess, and also naturally the children were at an age, I think Judah was 3.
Not quite, yeah.
Not quite, but we could see pretty quickly he's going to be in nursery at school.
We thought he was our last child. We've since had another one, but who's wonderful, just to be clear.
But suddenly the context was very different. So it's like, right, all of this stuff we've really talked about. And the difference now was we're not going to be serving under leaders or organisations.
Or a set culture.
We get to set it.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's when it was, I guess some of the rubber hit the road.
Yes.
And that was really brilliant, but interesting.
Yeah. And I think, I just want to say as well that we had 4 children in quite quick succession. I might have said this already in another episode, but I think it's important to say it again. I chose to be at home for those 7 years. I mean, we had 4 children, so obviously that has a time implication. And it, on the one hand, yes, it brought a lot of life. I started this ministry called Molo, which was all around sort of supporting mums in that stage of life. But it was hard. It is a hugely sacrificial season. And if you are called to leadership, it's a very frustrating season in many ways because it's very limiting, and you have to die to self. Oh my goodness, it is like death to self. Yeah. And yet I wouldn't change those 7 years for all the world.
No.
Having that opportunity to be at home and raise them, in some ways, is like career suicide, humanly speaking, because I took sort of a 7-year career gap, if you like. And of course, the fear is, am I going to be able to step back into leadership in a church context, having spent 7 years at home, etc.? Have I lost too much ground? And my discovery personally has been not at all. If anything, those 7 years at home, I love that I was able to sort of nurture my kids at that stage, but also it's such a key learning ground as a leader.
And character formation.
Character formation, all of it. So nothing has been wasted. But essentially, yes, we arrived in Birmingham. Our youngest at the time was ready to start nursery school. And it on a very practical level, it freed up my time.
Yeah. So if we're then to jump into, so we decided we wanted to lead together. And again, there are different models of leadership. So, and again, neither's right nor wrong. You've got to find out what's right for you. So some couples, I'd say, the man is very clearly the leader, but the woman has some real gifts in preaching or communicating or hosting.
Or a specific ministry within the church.
Yes. Or we've got friends who, you know, the guy's the leader and the wife is more the support. We've got a great friend of ours, she's the leader, and he works in a different area of church ministry.
Yeah.
And they sort of connect together, but she's very clearly...
They wouldn't even say that they lead the church together.
No, it's very much her. She leads the church. And so there are lots of different models, and I think it's important to understand who you are, because I think sometimes it can be confusing if you're saying you're leading everything together.
Yeah.
Where actually, if it's one or the other, the only one who's sort of making sort of staffing decisions, budget decisions, in all the key critical meetings, I think that just needs clear articulation. But we wanted to very much lead together. So we decided, again, and you were very helpful in helping. and I'm not saying this in a way of...
But I also think you were really open.
But
and
that's what I'm saying.
I want to encourage you because I think there are probably plenty of other scenarios where there might be a desire, let's say, from the woman to lead together. But what it really means in the practical is just not. It's not gonna wash with the guy.
Yeah,
and that's what I think.
I
think. Can I just say the other thing? I think this is really important before we move on, is to discern if you are called to lean together.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think it could be dangerous about what we did is if I was an absolute nightmare. Let's say. I don't think I am.
Hypothetically speaking.
I don't think I am.
No,
but
of course not.
if I was a really toxic leader, or if I just wasn't called to lead, but I'd sort of pushed this agenda on our relationship, or the other way around, that you weren't called to lead really, but because we're in a marriage, it's like, you know, I can think of friends of ours. He's a head teacher. And she works at the school. They don't say, "Oh, we lead the school together."
Yeah.
I mean, she's actually amazing, but she has a specific role because.
But in that discernment process, then, like we've talked about this. It's not just what you think; it's what others also feed in. And so I think we saw this consistent from people we knew and loved, from people who worked alongside us or around us. Would say we recognise this call
on both of you to lead together.
And so at HTB on our last few years, I think that was really affirmed and encouraged that the leadership call wasn't just on me, but it was on both of us.
Yeah.
And then prophetically, I'd say that was a thing on both of us. And actually, we work collaboratively really well together.
Maybe that's a good question to ask. How would you advise a couple to discern if they're called to lead together?
Well, I think that you've both got to be willing to sacrifice and make space for one another. We'll look at this in a second. And I think it's all the same principles. People speaking in.
Being asked to do it, maybe. Because that was the other thing. We got asked to do stuff together quite a lot.
And you were being asked independently to do other things.
Yeah.
And that's increased over the last 5 years, particularly, I'd say. But I think there's some really crunchy, hard conversations here because you need people to be honest.
Yeah.
To say, to help discern that. But just because of time, because we could go on all of this. When we started at Gas Sheet, so one of the things, and I say this not to say you kind of pushed your way in. This is collaborative. As I said, I was looking to you because I don't feel we had many models, people we knew that we could really unpack in detail. There are models out there, of course, but we were like, right, how do we set this up? And Rach, help me. How do we set this up so that you feel fully empowered and released to lead? So one of the things we said was that in terms of the staff team, we had a small team obviously back then, that it doesn't work if I line manage them all and you don't, because that says, yeah, Rach might do the odd talk, but really Tim's leading it.
Well, that actually this title of sort of co-senior pastor or whatever is tokenism, really. You're not actually fulfilling, it's just a title, you're not actually fulfilling the function of it. I think it's also important to say this wasn't about me wanting it was like, actually, we fundamentally think we will be able to nurture a better, healthier, more kingdom-shaped church if we lead it together. So that was the starting point. And I think the other thing to say is, perhaps one thing that I was more aware of right at the beginning than you would have been, and maybe this is what you're saying, is that because of the history of the church, because, at that point particularly, the vast, vast, vast majority of churches are led by men exclusively. Yeah. There's a default. Yeah. There is an inherent default when you start a church that the man is the leader. And so I was really conscious that we had this opportunity of a blank canvas, and yet it's never totally blank, because everyone brings in all their previous experiences of church, and the vast, vast, if not the entirety of our congregation right at the beginning will have come from churches where the man is the leader, either on their own, and the wife is the supporting role. Yeah. And we were trying to do something different. And so if we were going to do something different, we needed to be extra intentional about saying, hey, we're not going to do it like that. Yeah. We're going to do it like this.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying. So it's not you kind of forcing your way.
Yeah.
That's
no, I'm not
what
hearing
I'm
you
saying.
say that.
And I think also partly you're naturally sometimes better at me than those thinking structurally, you're good at that strategic stuff. And so we then ensured that we shared out the line management between us. We took it in turns who was going to lead staff meeting. When we were preaching rotas, ensure it was evenly shared out.
Hosting gatherings. And
but then I think what we figured out, we are both quite strong opinions.
I'm sure that is a shock to everyone.
So I remember one moment, our worship pastor back then, Anna Hellebronth, who was amazing.
An amazing leader.
And I think you were line managing her.
I can't remember.
No, I was line managing her. But there was something coming up, and I heard that this is what was planned.
I think it was around Christmas carols, because I historically hold Christmas carols. And so I heard, but you were her line manager because she's the worship leader.
I heard what was going on. And I called Anna, I was like, Anna, and I said it more nicely than this, that sounds like a terrible idea. I would never do that. Laid it on thick. And she went a bit quiet, and she said, the only problem is, Tim, this is exactly what Rachel's told me to do. So So then poor Anna felt caught in the middle. And that's where we thought, Hannah said, that's not fair on her. And so what we learned, as well as separating out line management, clear boundaries on these kind of things, you're taking the steer oversight. So if I have a question or a challenge, I don't go to the team, I go to you. Yeah. Are you sure that's... Because otherwise the team get caught up in your disagreements and so we needed to create clear space to let the other flourish and thrive without the other person constantly trying to wade in.
And I think that was the other thing, is because I'd had this 7-year gap, if you like, being home with the kids. You had 7 years more experience than me leading worship, but also leading meetings in a whole variety of different contexts. You were a really experienced leader at that point. And I wasn't, in terms of my experience of leading.
Miles on the clock, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, there were two things. Number one, I had a lot to learn from you. And I think there was a time early on where I felt a bit stubborn, like, well, I don't want to learn from you, because that almost acknowledges that you're more experienced than me. But actually, I look back now, and so much of who I am as a leader is because I've learned from you, that you have taught me and you've modeled it. And so, I'm so grateful for that. But the other side is, I also needed space to do things slightly differently, to lead authentically out of who I am. And funnily enough, I think one of the most important things for us about leading together is creating space to lead on our own.
Yeah.
That actually, and this is, I had this conversation recently with a couple that was asking us about leading together. And I said to her, you know what? you need to put yourself on the rota, hosting services, leading gatherings without your other half. That's what's happening here, is because he is a naturally very strong, experienced leader. He was constantly sort of filling in the gaps, compensating, stepping in, which I think you did a bit early on.
Yes.
Because, and I was like, you just need space. Like, tell him he stays at home with the kids and you go and host the gathering. And she was like, no, I couldn't do that. I was like, well, that's the only way you're going to grow. If the only context that you're ever leading is side by side, and if he's got way more experience than you are never going to grow. Yeah. And so I think even like with staff meeting fairly recently, we used to always host staff meetings together. And what I noticed,
shifted along.
No, that's true actually. But I feel like we'd fallen into the habit.
No, what happened was, there's another shift where Summer.
Yeah, I went off on adoption leave
for a year.
Well, more than that, 18 months, 2 years really. Because then we had COVID.
But you were kind of, but basically from leading the staffing team, some of those or more internal decision making, you were much more out of it.
Yeah.
So then I stepped back in. Actually, I'd rather have not. I actually much preferred sharing it out together. So in some ways, and that showed a real shift, because it was rather like, thank goodness, right, let me crack on and stop interfering. It was like, I don't want to do it on my own because it's too much to carry on my own. But actually then you just kind of get back into it, and then you kind of integrating back in. Yeah. And you're rightly like, I don't want to sort of jump back into all of those things, and quite happy for you to
you
handle all of that. Yeah. But I think we've had to then slightly clarify who's doing what.
My sister and I've launched the Orchard, and that's taken up a significant amount of time, and things have shifted and changed. But I think, I do think part of the reason I've been able to grow as a leader is because I had space to do it on my own. And actually, interestingly, my sister, Amy, is married to Johnny, and they lead a church together. Yeah. And she's perhaps less forthright than I am, typically. But what I love about Johnny is they'd be in a meeting together and he'd say, right, Amy, you do it, you lead. And she'd be like, no, I can't. He's like, yeah, you do it. Yeah. And rather than constantly step in, fill the gap, fill the sort of the leadership void, he would just sit back and say, no, go on. Yeah. And she'd be like, no. And he's like, no, you've got this. You're a leader. You can do this. And so he wasn't sort of deliberately trying to throw him to the deep end. He was more just saying.
And Johnny's amazing at that.
He's really good at that. He's like, you don't need me to hold your hand here. Yeah. And having done that a number of times to Amy, right? You're preaching on Sundays. No, I couldn't. Yeah, you are.
She wouldn't be like that now, would she?
No, gosh, no. Yeah. But what I loved about that is that it was his intentionality. Yeah. And I think Amy, personality-wise, needed that.
Yeah. I think as well, so it's been interesting, say, this last term, a real shift, because the other thing is that there's creating space, but you also, right through the core, have to fight for the other person to be released. So, for example, this term, with the Orchard, you were in Australia for 10 days. Not that I'm counting exactly. And back for, was it a week or 10 days? And then off to Dubai for a week. And so that's been a massive role reversal from what we've historically had, where I've been traveling, you've been the stay at home. And actually...
and you've done it with huge amounts of grace.
And I think we've done it well.
No, I think we have actually, yeah.
And actually what was really interesting, particularly the Australia, maybe Dubai was slightly like hanging on by fingernails, was like, I know what it's like to be away. Yeah. I know perhaps sometimes what it was like when you come back to someone who's a bit, struggling that the person's been away. But I felt like I tried really hard to bless you and honour you and release you.
You did. You
whilst
absolutely
also trying,
did.
Having to
run the home, run the church. Yeah.
And rather than being resentful, it's like, you've done this for me so many times, and it's right and fair to
and even the fair thing is interesting, because I wasn't going on those trips like, right, it's my turn.
It's like God's call.
It's like, and I think that's the key, is that actually, if it was still you doing all the traveling, and it was still me
Being
at home.
I've had some big invites.
No, you are.
I was going to say something. Not go on, Karen.
A bit fleshy way.
Yes, a little bit needy.
Okay, but I think that's the point: is recognizing the call within the season on each other's lives, making space, honoring, encouraging, and essentially, I think it does. It in order to lead together, it does require a degree of death to self.
100%. But
that's the tricky bit.
The way I guess you look at it is you being away doing all of that. I might feel a bit of a personal loss, like it would be right, but the team wins.
Yeah.
Hughes
and
team
the family win.
Yeah. And well, that's an interesting one, isn't it, with the kids and how all that works.
Yeah.
But I think we try and work hard to make it.
Well, because again, leading together for us doesn't look like on a Sunday us both being at the 6 p.m. gathering, for example.
Yeah.
We have a 6 p.m. service that's packed. It's all our students.
Yeah.
It's a great, it's an amazing, I mean, they're all, it's great. But we are very, very rarely, probably once, twice a year are we both at the 6 p.m. gathering together, because we recognise for our family, for our kids, Sunday night is...
You see, actually, that's good, because that was something early on.
Yeah.
And I found this really hard because it was so against what I was used to. We'd take in turns Sunday nights.
Yeah, well, that was my point, is that rather than sort of getting a babysitter in every Sunday night so that we could lead together, actually what leading together looked like is one of us at home with the kids and one of us at church.
And what I had to work out, because I used to, when I was at home, it's not that I was, well, partly didn't want to put the kids to bed, but I is partly like, what, if I'm not there, will they get it right? Will it be okay? Which is I think I was, as I started applying to the church, probably overly anally retentive, just uptight. But actually what I understood eventually was I just didn't want to miss out.
Yeah.
I didn't want to miss out.
And my point was, well, I've missed out, in inverted commas, for a very, very, very long time.
And then you look back over a few months and think, actually, this 6 p.m. is massively growing, and it doesn't seem to be dependent on both of us being there.
Yeah.
It seems to be growing very well with times me not being there. So you trust God's in it. So anyway, we've probably spoken for long enough, haven't we?
Yes.
Do you want to give, if you could give one bullet point to encourage people as they consider working together, what would you say?
I think this probably speaks into, again, our preconceived ideas about leadership anyway. And I think it's a bit of a journey that we've both been on, that I think our egos can so easily get intertwined with this idea of leadership. And that we can think that we've sort of reached this pinnacle of leadership when we're doing something that's highly visible, that's highly successful. And I think when I look at the seasons of my life, I recognize that some of the most beautiful leadership moments have been very small and very unseen. And I think the danger with co-leadership is that you're fighting over the big bit, the big stuff, the seen stuff, and that actually God is not that fussed about scale and size and visibility, that he is really just most concerned about where your heart's at and what your motivations are. And so I guess my challenge for both of us is constantly checking our motives. And are we really mutually submitting to one another? Are we preferring one another? Are we seeing the bigger picture? Are we ensuring that we're not sort of becoming fixated on the big, shiny, successful, visible aspects of leadership? Yeah. That would be my thought. That's the end of the series, Tim.
Me? My one point.
Your one reflection. Oh, I thought I couldn't work it out.
We used to lead together, but now
I was trying to read your face there.
I'd say the thing, and we haven't really looked at this, is one of the things where I think it went a bit wrong at times is we would be trying to figure out together what we thought about a topic.
Oh yeah, this is a good example.
Team leadership, say, do you go to 2 services on a Sunday morning?
Like key strategic decisions.
And we'd be in our core team meeting and we would be disagreeing.
Yeah.
And what was good is I think it's really created a collaborative process in our team that everyone feels they can contribute. But the other times, I think it was a bit destabilizing.
Yeah.
For the team.
So they thought mum and dad were at odds with each other.
Yeah, and sometimes they said, look, there's some decisions it feels like you both need to do the work beforehand to know what you think, so that when we bring that into the room, you guys are on the same page. So we've had to work harder. Right, we're having this discussion on Tuesday. Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
No, right. Let's make sure we are.
Yeah.
And then, so it has created a bit more work. So actually, our PA used to put in a meeting.
Yeah.
Weekly, I think, where it's like all the things that we need to talk about to make sure we're on the same page. And we don't do it so much now, but early on, that was really important.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Oh, I've got a million other things to say now.
I know, but we've already gone on quite a while.
Yeah, no, you're right. We should stop.
Guys, that's it. Season 1 finished. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Do send your questions. You can follow us on Instagram and message us, and we'd love to maybe in the next series talk more.
Try and incorporate people's questions.
Thoughts. Hope this has been helpful, and thanks a lot.